welcome to Corinne's Picks. I'm your host, Corinne Basabe. Today we are delighted. I am so glad to be sitting here with Stella Berg. She's a remarkable artist, a mosaic artist. Welcome to Corinne's Picks.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I have followed you on Instagram for such a long time and really enjoyed just your technique, you know, the subjects that you've done, Katanji, you've done Frida Kahlo, two of my favorites.
Wonderful.
Your work is really remarkable.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your journey into mosaics.
Well, I went to school for acting, actually. So I was acting in the city for about 10 years, and then the pandemic happened, and theater shut down, and I also work in the hospitality industry and catering and events. Those also shut down. So I found my way to mosaics at that point. I had made a few pieces prior to the pandemic, things that I sort of did for fun or for a friend as a gift, but not very seriously until the pandemic. And then I was reached out to by a colleague of mine from the past asking if I still made the mosaics, and she commissioned a piece for me, which was very novel. I hadn't received many commission requests. So it felt like a sign that that was a direction to be moving in for me. And I made the piece for her, and she was delighted with it. And I posted it on my Instagram page and pretty quickly got another request for a commission. So I was doing them pretty consistently. Mostly friends of mine would find my page and request a family or friend of theirs. And so I was doing that for a couple of years, and then I was asked to make a pet portrait. That was a new direction for me. So I made pets, and then a friend suggested maybe you do celebrity figures because it's so nice to see your work, but we don't know any of these subjects. So what if you tried doing a subject that everyone is familiar with? So my first of what I called my Boss Women series was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I made a piece of RBG, and I've since been working in kind of those categories. I have my Boss Women series, my pet portraits, and most recently I started doing flowers, and I've also started doing illustrations for a children's book.
You know, I think, you know, I have some more questions, but I think I'm going to jump to some images because no one will know what we're talking about unless they see one of your mosaics.
Sure.
So can I see the first two slides, please? This is, I believe this is your studio?
This is my studio. This is my apartment in Harlem. This is me working at my drafting table. You can see my computer is on the table because I work from reference photos. So as I'm working, and we can go into my materials in a moment, but I am looking at the reference photo as I'm building the piece.
And you're working standing up, too.
I am. It's better for my back.
So
many years
the
sitting.
The table is really interesting. That's a table that a lot of graphic designers
and architects.
would
It's
use.
a drafting table. It's purposefully high, and I'm a tall lady.
and it's really interesting because when I saw your images on Instagram, I wasn't really quite sure of the size. But looking at you working at the table, what is the size of the piece you're working on there?
That is an 8.5 by 11, and I would say that's the size that I work in the most.
So the viewer needs to know that when they see these pieces of color, that they're really, really tiny.
The pieces are very, very tiny.
Okay, all right. Okay, so can we see the next image, please? Wow. Tell us a little bit about this image.
This is Frida Kahlo. She is a late Mexican artist and someone whom I've admired for a long time. So all of the women that I choose for my Boss Women series are women that I find exceptional for various reasons. And they're all in different industries, more or less. But she's a visual artist, and I just love her self-expression. I love how she always has live flowers in her hair. And so I decided that I wanted to do a piece of Frida, and I scoured through my Frida books to find a piece that I wanted to recreate. And I found this one, and so I will use the reference photo will be a jumping off point for me. I'll look at what already exists in the piece and decide if things inspire me that I want to keep to try and replicate, or if I want to use it as a departure point. So the piece has her against this stucco turquoise background, which I loved. And so I used that as one of the background colors, but then all of my pieces then depart, and I go off of just sifting through magazines, coming across different colors and textures that I find interesting and find complementary to what's already there. So it's very experimental.
So you're using paper that I guess you said there's a company used for paper, but you're also using strips of paper from magazines. Am I correct?
So the base paper, because it's magazine paper on cardstock paper. So the cardstock, the thicker paper that I use, instead of a canvas, for instance, I mount all of my pieces on paper. That paper comes from a mill in England that I like. But all of the tiles are from magazines. They're just pieces from magazines I'll go through and I'll tear out and rip up and then glue the pieces directly onto the paper.
And just for, many of the viewers are actually also artists. The adhesive you're using, what kind of adhesive are you using?
I use a glue stick.
A glue stick. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. It's really fascinating. And I
Thank
love
you.
the color palette of the Kahlo piece. I love the blues. It's
Me too.
so beautiful.
Thank you.
So is that image altered in Photoshop, or is it that blue, that rich?
It's that blue, it's that rich. I haven't altered it at all.
Wow, wow. Okay, can we see another image, please?
She's my favorite. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This was the first of the Boss Women series. This was the first piece that I made after a friend's suggestion that I make celebrity figures. She just feels so iconic, and it was a fun challenge for me to take on someone whom everyone knows what they look like. If I made an image of my friend's grandchild, chances are most people won't know when I put up the image whether or not it looks very much like the subject. Everyone knows what Ruth Bader Ginsburg looks like. So I put a lot of pressure on myself for there to be an obvious likeness, which I think I was successful in doing.
So who introduced you to mosaics?
Well, I was born in New York, and I was here through elementary school, but my parents, my brother and I moved to Istanbul when I was 11. So I went to middle school and high school in Istanbul, Turkey. And mosaics are everywhere in Turkey. So I think on a subconscious level, I was impressed and moved by mosaics. They're in every mosque. They're in a lot of design that you see in Istanbul. So I saw it a lot. And I actually was given a self-portrait assignment from an art teacher in high school. And there were no parameters. It just had to be a self-portrait. And for whatever reason, I chose to do it out of paper in this mosaic style. So that was the first. And I would say that it was growing up in Istanbul that connected me to mosaics.
What about the surface? I know part of the experience of having a mosaic is the surface and being able to touch the surface of it. With paper, are you leaving it without glass when you frame it, or are you putting it behind glass? Like how are you framing these pieces on paper?
It is being framed behind glass.
Okay.
But I think that because of the style that I make it in, I don't cut any of the pieces. I hand tear each individual piece. So there's a texture quality to each of the tiles, and also because I layer it, some areas are higher than others just based on how many pieces of paper are layered below it. So I think that you can still get the effect of the dimension of it being tiles even behind the glass.
Is it matte, or do you put a glaze on top of it?
So far, I don't put any glaze over the top of it. It's just at the end, it gets framed behind glass.
Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, can I see the next image, please?
This is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She is a Nigerian novelist, and I love her stories.
Which books have you read of hers?
I've read Americana, Half of a Yellow Sun, Purple Hibiscus, We Should All Be Feminists.
Wow.
Have you read her books?
I believe that I saw one of I think The Orange Sun was made into a film, and I read Americana.
Americana is a beautiful book. Americana is a book that my then boyfriend, now husband, and I read together on a road trip traveling through Oregon during the pandemic.
Wow.
And it was a really sweet bonding experience to be on these, in the car for many, many hours, but entertained by trading off reading this book to each other. And she's just a remarkable woman too.
It's so funny. I'm that superficial that beyond the beauty of her writing, I love her as an author. One thing I love about her is her interesting hairstyles.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of her, she's a beautiful woman, but it's one of the attributes of her that make her especially beautiful. And she changes her look frequently. So that was fun in choosing an image of her that I wanted to use as the mosaic reference photo, because she looks very different image to image to image.
I hope you send her a copy of that, the completed piece. We're going to go for a commercial break at this point, and we'll be back with the wonderful Stella Berg. Welcome back to Corinne's Picks. We've been talking to Stella Berg and exploring her wonderful mosaics. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So, we talked about your process in terms of tearing bits of paper, and also how you choose some of your subject matters. Let's look at another one and talk a little bit more about subject. Oh, this is Simone Biles.
It is Simone Biles.
Tell me a little bit about how you created this one.
So Simone Biles is the most decorated gymnast in history. She's an incredible athlete, and human being. So I had, in the past with my Boss Women series, been choosing portraits that just featured them in a still pose. And this is the most recent piece that I did in the Boss Women series, and I decided I wanted it to be more narrative. I wanted to tell more of a story. So I've been putting my women in scenes. And so with Simone, it made sense to have her competing in a stadium. And with that, a stadium has an audience. And so what I love and I think is interesting about this piece is the audience behind Simone performing. I made every single figure individually. They each took about 5 minutes because I would have to go through and find alternating skin colors. I wanted it to be a eclectic ethnicity audience, and everyone had a different hair color. Everybody had a different shirt or dress that they were wearing. And then because they were in close proximity, they either had to have arms or, you know, their shirts had to be full length. So in putting them together into this composition, each one took about 5 minutes. And it was so much fun to do, to come up with all of these different combinations of color. And yeah.
What's striking to me is the stairs, because you would literally have to cut these thin pieces like the width of a matchstick or thinner for each step. Like that could not have been torn.
It was torn.
What?
It was.
What?
And actually, so the stairs, what I love about the work that I do that makes it interesting for me is that going through magazines, I will find things that I think will translate into the piece that might not be the thing itself. For instance, the stairs. There was an ad campaign for a shoe designer that had this sort of, I don't even know exactly what it was, but the backdrop of the design was this trellised thing that I thought maybe if I cut it and I put it on its side, turn it 90 degrees, that it will give the illusion of these steps because of how they were spaced out.
So that's one piece. That's not individual.
It's not
strips.
It's not one piece, but it's not every single stair. I tore it in such a way and layered it in such a way that it gives the illusion of stairs.
Oh, okay.
Because it had the white and then it had the black. It gave this contrast and dimension that gave the essence of this stair.
You know, I enjoy seeing the pixelated colors. Have you ever considered just going for the colors that in a piece that had no subject, just colors?
I often start the pieces with just colors. For all of the women that were the profiles, I start with the background colors because that's the most fun and free for me. I'll just flip through and I'll choose this beautiful bright red that you have. This would call to me if I was flipping through the magazine and say, I have to use that somehow, because the color and then the texture of the fuzz and the weave of the knit, all of these things together are beautiful, and I know will translate really well into a piece. So even though there's always a subject, I start with the background first because I just love it. I have the most fun with it.
The lime green and the white specks under Simone Biles' legs is what I was just loving that. Just loving this.
Thank you. And for that, it was, you know, in an arena, they have the billboards, the advertisements, the sponsors, and I didn't want to have any particular sponsor in the piece, but the illusion of, or the implication of, like, this would be a sponsor banner.
So let's get into another piece, because I have a habit of talking so much we don't see all the slides, so I want to make sure we see everything. Who is this baby?
This was the piece that was commissioned from me during the pandemic. This was the one that launched my career as a mosaic artist. So I'm forever grateful for this piece and the patron who commissioned it. This is Max, her son. And initially I told her, I said, you know, he's looking off to the side. I don't know, I've never done a piece like that, and I've never done a piece where there's so much of skin showing as opposed to a garment. And she challenged me and said, yes, that's okay. Like, let's see how it goes. I like that he's looking off to the side. I like that he's a little boy wrapped up in his beach towel and you can see his belly. And so I am very fond of this piece because of the personal connection of it launching my chapter as a visual artist.
And there's so many shades of brown on that child's skin, and you have to really be thoughtful. This is really a discipline that you're doing.
Thank you.
It's really something that you have to be very disciplined to carry out. And tell the audience how long it takes you to do one piece.
They take me anywhere from, 25 hours to the Simone Biles piece took me months. And if I added all of the hours together, it'd probably be 50, 60. The piece of the little boy that we just saw probably took me 25. And it's not a large piece either. It's probably 7 by 9, 8 by 10. Let's say it's a small piece. But because I hand rip each piece, and because I have to look for the tiles in the magazines, it does take me a while. And it's just very detailed too.
Okay, can we have the next slide, please?
This was my first ever mosaic outside of the assignment that I mentioned earlier in school of the self-portrait. This was a gift for an ex-boyfriend of mine. But I like it because, one, it was my first, and two, I like that it's a lot more abstract than what I'm doing now. It's made up of bigger tiles, and you can just see that I'm not endeavoring for there to be a supernaturalistic look or a perfect resemblance. It's a little bit alien and abstract and bizarre looking, but I really liked that quality to it.
I actually like it very, very much. I like it's very contrasty too. I really like that piece as well.
Thank you.
Can you have the next piece?
Turbo. So this is an example of my pet portraits. I was putting out this work on my Instagram page, and then one of my buyers asked if I would do a pet, and I started doing more pet portraits, and this is one that I did about 2 years ago. I just love this piece. There's an attention to his gaze and a personality that I think comes through in it. And then just going off of, you had asked me earlier if I ever just do the pieces for the color, you can see, half, if not 2/3 of this piece are the color. I love playing with that in finding pieces that I think will complement one another, and finding pieces that have shades of multiple together in a row. I think in the bottom corner you can see there's that sort of like light seafoam color with specks of yellow, which tied into the yellow bench, which tied into other little pieces in there that have yellow. And then the seafoam might look good with, this like charcoaly gray, almost lava rock looking textured piece. And then that ties into his fur too. So I just love playing.
Yeah, I enjoyed the background of that piece immensely. I really love. Actually, my favorite part of the painting is not the dog. It's actually the background colors.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite pieces about that particular portrait as well.
Okay, so let's see another piece.
This is Olive. I had a theme when I submitted these pieces to you of first. This was my first pet portrait. And it was such a relief to me because dogs have fur and there was a freedom in representing a dog that I didn't feel that I had with humans. Humans have skin and there's different skin colors, but skin is skin, whereas animal fur, skin, hair can look very, very different animal to animal, and there's a lot more freedom to be able to kind of scavenge for unconventional pieces that will translate. So like you can see in his rump, I used bits from an image of a field, bits from a handbag, bits from a sweater, like had all these little pearls in it. So it was so fun for me to have this challenge of making a pet because it opened up a new world for me, but it also made it evident to me that I could play in a different way and experiment with things that would be kind of a surprise if you just saw the image.
So we only have about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
Where is your art going? Like what is your next challenge in terms of mosaics? Like where do you see or would like to see this go?
I would like to have 15 to 20 images, Boss Women series paint pieces to present to a gallery, to have a gallery show. I am accepting pet portrait commissions. I love making the pets, so I'm always accepting new requests for pets, and I'm developing illustrations for a children's book.
Okay, so I know that your Instagram is on the screen, so if anybody would like to see more of your art, they can see it there. And you know, I'm honored to have you on my show, and hopefully you'll come back when you get some more pieces, and
I would love that.
We'll talk some more.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.